What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to Nice Gaming. I'm McGarvin and you're tuned into a brand new episode of Renew or Revoke, where we look at your favorite things, but as video games. As you know, last time we were getting ready to review Racjin Paris, but as we were filming, my beloved N64 died. And with the way my bank account is set up, a new N64 really isn't in the cards. But luckily, we did think of a new way to go ahead and repair my N64. Alchemy.
Found it. I gotta go grab something from the car. Don't start without me. Both of us have to be here for this.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'll check the calculations. I mean, math isn't my strong suit, but I think I could probably do this without him.
NANI?
Nah, I got this.
Yo, I said you have to wait for me. What are you doing?
Oh man, I think I really messed up the calculations.
What? Oh, dog, you gonna be pissed.
What happened?
Oh boy, guys, I really messed this one up. But it's okay, I may be Stitch right now, but Darnell is gonna fix it. So while he works on that, I'm gonna go through the FMA video game in hopes of finding an answer there. Today, I'm starting my research on the 2003 PS2 game, Fullmetal Alchemist and the Broken Angel. Our story opens with Ed, Al, and Major Armstrong riding the rails as they make their way to Central City, when their train is suddenly hijacked by a terrorist group headed towards the nearby town of Heathcart, where a bevy of shady alchemists were called upon to gather for unknown reasons. While Major Armstrong deals with the henchfolk, Ed and Al make their way atop the train to get answers from the leader of the terrorists himself, Jens Breslau, a badass with face scars, a ponytail, and an automail left arm. Aside from the automail arm, I think I just described Yamcha from DBZ.
Did you just call Yamcha a badass?
Ed has Gens on the ropes, but fires an ill-advised shot that results in the train crashing, allowing Gens to slip away. Uninterested in a cleanup, Ed and Al break away from Armstrong's escort and make their way to the nearest town with a train to Central. Along the way, our boys find themselves in a chimera-infested mountain pass where they encounter Armony, a young girl who crash lands on Ed after falling while picking flowers from the mountainside. Ed demands an apology, but Armony refuses and takes off, causing Ed and a reluctant Al to give chase. Their chase lands the boys in Heathcart, where they once spent time with their alchemy master Azumi, her friend Professor Wilhelm Eselstein, a renowned expert researching a powerful alchemic tool known as the Philosopher's Catalyst, and the professor's daughter, Celine. The Elrics are shocked to see that Heathcart is now completely abandoned and teeming with wild chimeras. Ed and Al fight their way through town and find themselves at a cemetery outside of a nearby church. Armony is nowhere to be found, but Al spots the flower that she had picked at the mountain pass laid across a nearby gravesite belonging to Celine Eiselstein, Professor Wilhelm's daughter. Our heroes barely have time to process the death of their friend before the pastor of the church spots them and brings them inside for shelter and an explanation. At this point, the story is bogged down by exposition, but to summarize, Celine died under mysterious circumstances that only her father knows the details of. Shortly after that, the Chimeras showed up at Heathcart, wrecked shop, and forced the survivors to flee and rebuild a new Heathcart. The boys learn that they can catch a train to Central City from New Heathcart in the morning, so they agree to stay the night at the church. But things take a turn when the church is attacked by an impossibly hot villainess named Camilla and her lucky pet Chimera. Look, I'm not saying I'm jealous of that Chimera, but I'm not jealous of that Chimera.
Have some shame, man.
Al and Ed make short work of the Chimera, but Camilla escapes and disappears into the night. The next morning, Ed and Al arrive in New Heathcart, where they're met by a town full of rogue alchemists who have no intention of allowing our state alchemists to leave. Following an annoyingly long chase sequence and a run-in with the trio of color-coded crooks known as the Alchemy Brothers, Ed and Al are finally set to access the train station when they happen upon a commotion in the town square. As luck would have it, Armony is at the center of the dust-up, where she is berating the Alchemy Brothers for lying about teaching her alchemy. Ed and Al intervene and quickly eliminate the brothers, which impresses Armony enough to request that Ed stay in New Heathcart and teach her alchemy. Ed declines, citing their need to catch the first train out to Central, but learns that because of the damage from his fight with Gens, all trains to Central have been halted for the next few days. With no alternatives, the boys agree to stay with Armony and her father, who turns out to be the Professor Wilhelm Eselstein. The boys spend some time catching up with the professor, but suspect that he's not being forthright regarding anything related to Celine's death, New Heathcart, or the Chimeras running amok in Old Heathcart. Wilhelm remains tight-lipped though, only confirming that Armony is his youngest daughter and that she is forbidden from learning alchemy. The catch-up session ends and Wilhelm calls on his two assistants Greta and Margot to show the boys to their room. While the boys settle in, we're shown a conversation that confirms Greta and Wilhelm's involvement in both the wild chimeras and the rogue alchemist in town. Margot overhears the conversation and we later learn that she is actually Riza Hawkeye in disguise. For the next hour or so, the story absolutely crawls, but I'll sum it up pretty quickly. Wilhelm sends Ed and Al to pick some ether flowers that Armony had been picking earlier in the game, and Armony tags along with them. Armony opens up about her desire to learn alchemy as she and the boys bond and everyone gets to know each other a little better. There's a ton of backtracking at this point, but it's all capped off with a really sweet montage that shows Armony's growth as an alchemist. But if I detail all of that, we'll be here all day. And ain't nobody got time for that. Armony is discussing her alchemic progress with Ed and Al when she suddenly sprouts a wing from her back and collapses. Her breathing starts to weaken, and in search of answers from Wilhelm, our heroes take Armony back home to find that chimeras have completely taken over the castle grounds. Ed transmutes a safe place to hide Armony, and with that, the Elrics begin their hunt for Wilhelm. Here's where things start to go sideways. You spend the next hour fighting through a horde of chimeras, entering Wilhelm's lab, fighting through a second horde of chimeras, finding Wilhelm, and then immediately turning around and going back outside. The whole sequence could have been a cutscene. It's basically here to pad runtime and introduce the corrupt General Nemda, who I guess is here as a red herring? I don't know. They play him up as some genius masterminding the whole event, but he's way too incompetent to be taken seriously. So long story short, the General shows up with the battle chimera created by Greta in hopes of testing its power against some wild chimeras. But of course, General Jackass loses control of his chimera, which forces the Elric brothers to step in and hit it with that 5-finger death punch. And because corruption knows no limit, the General orders the arrest of the Elrics for destroying his precious chimera, which forces the boys to make a break for it to try to avoid the long arm of the law. Oh, and for no reason whatsoever, Gens Breslau conveniently shows up out of the clear blue yonder, and with a new automail arm to match his older one, he volunteers to capture the Elrics. The boys make short work of Gens, but the distraction slows them down just a little too much. Ed and Al find themselves surrounded by the military police, Major Armstrong, and Colonel Roy Mustang, the latter of whom confirms the General's arrest order and hauls the good guys off to the pokey. As all of this is going down, Professor Azelstein emerges from his lab and tries to hide Armony under exposed wing. Unfortunately, his efforts are all for naught as Greta stumbles upon one of the feathers from Armony's wing and pieces together that the Philosopher's Catalyst is in fact part of Armony now. Pleased with her discovery, Greta hatches a plan to claim the catalyst for herself before removing her glasses and revealing that she is in fact fine-ass Camilla in disguise. Elsewhere, Ed and Al break out of prison, learn about Nemda's conspiracy, and return to the church where they're reunited with the pastor and Armony. Knowing that the professor is in danger, the gang re-enters the castle via the sewers, locate the professor, and start asking the tough questions. The professor explains that while testing the power of the catalyst, there was a rebound that began claiming Celine's body. Wilhelm was able to save Celine's life with the catalyst, but the resulting reaction transmuted Celine into Armony, who's of course eavesdropping from the other side of the door. Distraught to learn that she is neither chimera nor human, Armony retreats to her room where Camilla makes her move. At this point, General Nemda is back launching a full-scale assault on Azelstein Castle. Fortunately, Armstrong, Mustang, and Hawkeye show up to provide backup. The boys learn that Camilla has taken Armony and they spring into action, kicking off the story's final arc. Oh, and they beat up Gens one more time along the way for good measure. Ed and Al arrive at the castle's tower where Armony is being kept, and they're greeted by Wilhelm, Camilla, and 3 of her battle chimeras. While the boys are busy with the chimeras, Camilla attempts to separate Armony from the catalyst, but is disrupted by Wilhelm, who forces a rebound on Camilla. Now horribly disfigured, but still impossibly hot, Camilla transmutes a 4th beastly chimera in one last gasp for victory. All 4 chimeras go down without much resistance, and the boys are able to defeat Camilla, who avoids capture yet again by jumping off the tower. With Armony still weakening by the second, Wilhelm instructs the boys to collect as many of Armony's scattered feathers as possible, since he claims that's the only way to save her. No sooner do they finish collecting them do the boys realize they were duped, and both Wilhelm and Armony are gone. Ed and Al race back to the lab, but under orders from Wilhelm are prevented from entering by Mustang and Armstrong. Inside, Professor Azelstein decides to get rid of the Philosopher's Catalyst and put an end to Armony's suffering. In a genuinely touching moment, and fully knowing that he won't survive the process, Wilhelm destroys the catalyst, and in a flash, both he and Armony are no more. The story closes with a heartfelt goodbye note from Armony, and Ed, Al, and Major Armstrong back on the train to Central. And that's the story of Fullmetal Alchemist and the Broken Angel. There's an epilogue that ties up a few loose ends, but it's nothing serious, so I'll save that for another day. Honestly, I like the story here, but I hate how it's told. The pacing feels weird, and there are way too many moments that are supposed to feel like big plot twists that end up falling flat. And I know that this being a video game changes how the story gets told, but the execution here absolutely ruins an otherwise well-written narrative. It also didn't tell me anything about how to get my body back, so that was a dud. Hopefully Darnell fared better.
Hey, this alchemy thing's a lot harder than it seems. You sure you don't mind being stitched for a little bit? Cool.
Guess I'll keep digging in this game for some answers. At first blush, Broken Angel looks like a game with a ton of potential. I mean, it's not Breath of the Wild or anything, but for a game released just 3 years into the new millennium, I'd say it holds up pretty well graphically. It's definitely not winning any beauty pageants almost 20 years after the fact, but the visuals here deserve their due. But it's not just the graphics. The game also features these awesome original animate cutscenes that really help underscore and drive home the important story moments. And since these cutscenes were handled by Studio Bones with voices provided by Funimation, they look and sound like they were ripped straight from the TV show itself. Unfortunately, the best parts of this game's presentation are reserved for anime cutscenes, since the in-game cutscenes are reduced to static images placed over in-game backgrounds, with text-based dialogue replacing those sweet-ass voice acting. It's not the worst, but it definitely ages the game in a bad way. The lack of voice acting makes the cutscenes feel lifeless, and it really highlights how repetitive and forgettable the game's OST is. But if I'm being fair, I don't actually think that going the route of static images for the in-game cutscenes is necessarily a bad move. The images themselves are well drawn and very expressive. And to that point, while I would have loved to hear it with my own ears, the dialogue in this game is really well written. It's accurate to the characters and overflowing with those laugh-out-loud funny moments that make its anime and manga counterparts so much fun to experience. I'd say Broken Angel is more hit than miss in terms of presentation, but it's not nearly the same ratio when it comes to the gameplay. This game plays sort of like a poor man's Kingdom Hearts, in the sense that it's an action RPG with beat-em-up elements where you control one character while the other is controlled by an AI. Broken Angel recognizes Ed as the player, while Al is free to move and attack free of any input from the player. I mean, sure, you can command Al to stand down or use weapons or combine with Ed for a special combo attack, but for the most part, he's his own man. Or, boy, I guess. Anyway, Al definitely does a fair bit of work in this game with his tanky body and powerful physical combat, but Ed is definitely the engine that makes it all go. On top of hand-to-hand combat, Ed can attack with both weapons and alchemy, with the latter being a real bright spot in this game. In addition to spikes and walls, Ed is able to use the environment to transmute new weapons and machines that'll help in combat. It's an absolute lifesaver late in the game when your standard damage output is no longer cutting it, and the ability to transmute new weapons and gadgets on the fly goes a long way to varying the gameplay quite a bit. When you're not too busy stuffing enemies into bowling ball bags, the game plays like a regular RPG. You roam around the area, find treasure chests, allocate skill points, equip items, yada yada yada. It has the foundation to be a competent game mechanically, but unfortunately, Broken Angel falls woefully short of being a competent game due to some execution failings. The first thing you'll notice about the gameplay here is how ponderously slow it is. Ed and Al walk like they're waist deep in quicksand, which really bogs down the experience. And I know Ed has a metal leg and Al is quite literally a suit of armor, but come on. Unfortunately, the poor physics don't stop there. Jumping in this game is weird and floaty, and since the game fashions itself a pseudo-platformer at times, it was a huge pain in the cheeks jumping from platform to platform, only to miss because Ed decided to float 5 yards beyond my target. It's more annoying than outright bad, but it happens way too often to ignore. Moving along, between the poor physics and some antiquated design choices, the game feels older than it is at times, and that's never more evident than when discussing the enemy AI. The enemies in this game have the IQ of a starfish, and when they're not walking into walls trying to get to you, they're just standing around like the Easter Island statues. There are entire segments of the game you can skip just by running away from the enemies because they're not smart enough to corner you, and they're certainly not smart enough to chase you down, so the game can be stupidly easy at times. To make matters worse, the late game features 2 areas where you're supposed to grind through waves of enemies as you climb the tower or escape the prison, but just running away from the enemies and making a beeline towards the exits works just as well. It's super anticlimactic and really undercuts the stakes of both situations. The rest of my gripes are smaller things, like how the middle of the game feels like filler, or how some of the game is a little antiquated. Overall, I think Fullmetal Alchemist and the Broken Angel is one of those games that...
I got it. I figured it out. I know how to get your body back. Watched the TV show, read the manga, and I didn't find out jack shit. But I found someone that knows how to get your body back, but I had to make a slight trade.
I just need my body back as soon as possible.
Okie dokie. Let's hope this works.
Holy cow, that was unpleasant.
But at least it's all over now. There's only one thing left to do.
Overall, I think Fullmetal Alchemist and the Broken Angel is one of those games that was probably pretty revolutionary for its time, but unfortunately it's aged worse than warm milk in a gym bag. Despite top-tier presentation, the game is too often held back by its wonky physics, antiquated design choices, and a story that bogs down way too much in a few too many spots to be anything more than a collector's item. And for that, Fullmetal Alchemist and the Broken Angel earns a revote. This was honestly a pretty close one, but Broken Angel is something I would love to see with an updated physics engine and a fresh coat of paint, because underneath all of that bad is something worth looking at. So even though I ended up in a 2-foot fur body and had to sit through this lackluster game, I'd say today was still a roaring success, because we accomplished what we meant to. Line 64 is back in action, thanks to Darnell.
Except there's one problem. I had to trade something in order to get your N64 back in action and to get your body back.
Well, that's the law of equivalent exchange, so it makes sense, as long as you didn't trade Rugrats.
It was Rugrats in Paris. I can see you're taking this really well, but I thought ahead. I know where the guy lives at. All we have to do is go ahead and get it back. So you know what that means.
Are we gonna rob him?
We are gonna rob him.
I'll get my Black Air Forces. Join us next time as Darnell and I get our Kim Possible on and reclaim Rugrats in Paris. Thanks for watching, and if you like what you saw, leave us a like, comment, and please subscribe. Ring that bell to stay up to date, and until next time, stay nice.